Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Mantra Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 23, Devahuti's Lamentation, Text 2. Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Vacha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Vacha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Vacha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Vacha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Vacha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Cha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Vacha madhuraya cha bho. Vaishnavis. Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Cha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Vacha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhenatma shauchena Gauravena damena cha Shushrushaya saurudena Cha madhuraya cha bho Vishrambhena with intimacy Atma shauchena with purity of mind and body Gauravena, with great respect. Damena, with control of the senses. Cha, and Shushrushaya, with service. Saurudena, with love. Vacha, with words. Madhuraya, sweet. Cha, and Bho, O Vidura. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada. O Vidura, Devahuti served her husband with intimacy and great respect, with control of the senses, with love, and with sweet words. Here, two words are very significant. Devahuti served her husband in two ways, Vishrambhena and Gauravena. These are two important processes in serving the husband of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishrambhena means with intimacy, and Gauravena means with reverence. The husband is a very intimate friend, therefore the wife must render service just like an intimate friend. Okay. And at the same time, she must understand that the husband is superior in position, and thus she must offer him all respect. A man's psychology and a woman's psychology are different. As constituted by bodily frame, a man always wants to be superior to his wife, and a woman, as bodily constituted, is naturally inferior to her husband. Thus the natural instinct is that the husband wants to post himself as superior to the wife, and this must be observed. Even if there is some wrong on the part of the husband, the wife must tolerate it. And thus there will be no misunderstanding between husband and wife. Vishrambhena means with intimacy. But it must not be familiarity that breeds contempt. According to the Vedic civilization, a wife cannot call her husband by name. In the present civilization, the wife calls her husband by name, but in Hindu civilization, she does not. Thus the inferiority and superiority complexes are recognized. Damenacha. A wife has to learn to control herself even if there is a misunderstanding. Saurudena vacha madhuraya means always desiring good for the husband and speaking to him with sweet words. A person becomes agitated by so many material contacts in the outside world. Therefore, in his home life, he must be treated by his wife with sweet words. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjani Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today morning we are discussing from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the third canto, the section about Kapila's teachings. Here Devahuti is beginning her inquiries from her son Kapila, who is a manifestation of the Lord. And there the mode in which, before that happens, now the mode in which Devahuti serves her husband Kardama, that is described. So I'll focus on a particular theme. This whole topic can be the description of how a wife should serve a husband. That can be quite triggering in today's world. So I will talk on the theme of the role of hierarchy in bhakti. So, how important is hierarchy? Why is it important? And how is it to be understood in today's world? Now, at one level, if we have a cursory look at Srila Prabhupada's teachings, things can seem very hierarchical. Say, for example, the authority figure is the guru and the disciple. And it said that the disciples should be ready to change their life completely to satisfy the guru. And yasya prasadat bhagavad prasada, that it is only in pleasing the guru that we can make spiritual advancement. And while this is something which is true, but the question is this the only truth? We can look at both Shastra and we can look at Guru. Now, if you look at Shastra, let's consider one example which is very much there in the Bhagavatam itself, Narada and Dhruva. Now, here we will see that the hierarchy is not emphasized that much. Dhruva is wounded, devastated by the harsh words that his stepmother has spoken to him, and he leaves home in search of God. And when he meets Narad Muni on the way, Narad Muni tells him, don't take this insult so seriously. You're a small child and children sometimes fight. Children have squabbles and they say, I will never talk with you again. And then a couple of days later they are playing again. Oh, he or she is my BFF, best friend forever. They don't take quarrel so seriously. And he says that if you think you're not a child, if you think that you're an advanced person, then people who are evolved, people who are wise, they also don't take quarrel so seriously. They understand honor, dishonor, these things just come and go. So he says, just go back home and live peacefully, things will be settled. So what does Dhruva reply? He's just a 5-year-old child over here. Says, your words are true, but they find no place in my heart because my heart has been wounded. He said, I need a kingdom, and a kingdom bigger than my father. If you can help me find that kingdom, please guide me. Otherwise, let me go on my way. Now, Narad Muni does not take this as a personal affront. Who do you think you are challenging my authority? Don't you know that I am the guru of Vyasdev? You are just a kid. I have lived for more millennia than what you have lived for years. Now, he does not at all go in that direction. In fact, he appreciates, and there is a verse over there which is very striking. He says, Aho kshatriya tejasam man bhangam amrushyatam. That just consider the glory of the kshatriyas, that they cannot tolerate dishonor. Now we say, we should all be ready to be humble and tolerant. And he is not condemning, he is appreciating. So the idea is that Kshatriyas, by their inability to tolerate dishonor, that does not mean that they attack those who have dishonored them, but that inspires them to always act honorably. So, intolerance of dishonor or inability to tolerate dishonor, this can make them vindictive, and they can say, destroy anyone who dishonors. Now that is what can happen. But this is not the direction in which Kshatriyas are supposed to go. Instead, they avoid zealously any action on their part that will be dishonorable. So in this way, the inability to tolerate dishonor is a feature of Kshatriya psychology. And Narad Muni accommodates that. He doesn't say that you just didn't obey me, get lost. No, Narad Muni gives him a way. So it could be considered rebellious, but it's not rebellious. He's just being honest. He's being candid. This is where I am at. He says that, that the words you have spoken are true, but I am not at that level. They don't find a place in my heart. So Narad Muni basically gives him two levels. He says, you're a child or you can be a saint. This is a child, don't take insult so seriously. So both child and saint don't take insult seriously. But what he says, Dhruva says is, I am in between. I have a Kshatriya psyche. Although I am a child, but I have Kshatriya psyche. And dishonor is unbearable. Krishna also talks about this in 134 in the Bhagavad Gita. Sambhavitasya chakirtir maranaditirichyate. For one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. So the point I'm making over here is that hierarchy is not the sole thing that is insisted on. The important thing is spirituality. That when Narada doesn't say, you have to obey me. He says, okay, this is where you are at. Then this is a path for you from where you are. So, now, there is some extent we can say hierarchy is there in the sense that Narad Muni gives guidance and Dhruva follows. But it is not an absolute top-down. It is not just, it's not just like a domination. It is more of discussion. It's like, okay, if you can't do this, then you can do this. So there's a discussion over there. So, and we see this similar mood in Srila Prabhupada also. When Srila Prabhupada started our movement, it began in New York. And then after that came to the other coast, San Francisco. And if you look carefully at the way the devotees practiced, overall, New York was much more conservative at that time. The devotees were involved much more strictly following rules. Whereas the devotees who came to San Francisco, Shamsundar Prabhu, Mukund Maharaj, they were much more liberal, relatively speaking. Their focus was not so much on following the rules so strictly as it was in doing broad outreach, doing big programs. And Prabhupada accepted and valued both. Now, of course, if somebody went too much beyond boundaries, Prabhupada would put his foot down. But Prabhupada was not simply hierarchical. And not only that, we could see this is in the 1960s. And then if we look at it in the 1970s, we see at that time Srila Prabhupada with his disciples and Srila Prabhupada with his life members. Now, the life members in India especially, they were already elderly people, well established in society. Many of them had their own spiritual affiliations. Many of them were gurus of, not disciples of Advaitic gurus. And Prabhupada's mode of interaction with them was not the way he interacted with the disciples. With his disciples, mostly he gave them instructions. But with the life members, it was much more of engagement. So they were at a particular place in their lives. While Prabhupada would sometimes confront them with respect to impersonal readings, but Prabhupada did not focus so much on that. Prabhupada engaged them, they contributed financially, they used their contacts, they got things moving in India so that the temples could be built. So in that sense, Prabhupada was pragmatic about how people could be engaged. Now, why am I talking about hierarchy? Over here, I'm giving this broad picture because the topic here is gender hierarchy. That the way it is being talked about is that the wife should serve the husband. And Prabhupada did talk about that many places in his books. But at the same time, when Prabhupada engaged devotees, he encouraged and engaged everyone. So, when he engaged everyone, his focus was thus that everybody should be enthused to practice bhakti. That everybody should have the opportunity to connect with Krishna. Now, so the way say Srila Prabhupada dealt with women in India who were born and brought up in a particular culture where gender roles were clearly defined and divided, and the way Prabhupada dealt with women, his female disciples in America, where the gender roles were more diffuse. And so Prabhupada's dealings were different. In India, the gender roles were more defined and divided. Prabhupada's dealings were different. In the West, especially in America, the gender roles were more diffuse. They were not that defined or divided. They were more interchangeable, you could say. Not exactly interchangeable. They were more diffuse and mixed to some extent. And Prabhupada engaged devotees. The point was, Prabhupada, when he talked about protection, the point of protection was not restriction so much as facilitation. That everybody needs to be facilitated in their service, and not so much restricted. Restriction will lead a person to feel suffocated, and then they will go away. So, I'll take a broader picture now about this. In the Bhagavatam also, there is the description that according to Desha Kala Vibhagavit, that according to time, place, circumstance, things need to be explained. So, that this same Desha Kala Vibhagavit, that time, place, circumstance, this comes twice in the teachings of Narad Muni that I quoted, and it also comes in Bhishma's interactions in the first canto. So let's try to see from a broader perspective what is the role of hierarchy, and how important hierarchy is. So what I talked about till now is that hierarchy is important, but it is not rigid. It is flexible according to time, place, circumstance. So now look at broadly. See, there have been different political philosophies throughout history. Now, political philosophy means the idea about how states should be organized, how administration should be run, and what will be the driving or defining value for that. So now there are many political philosophies. I'll focus on three to explain their defining values, and then we'll talk about where bhakti falls within these. So we could consider there are the conservatives, then there are the leftists, the left, and then there are the liberals. I'll explain why I'm putting the left separately. So in the conservative, the focus is quite a bit on hierarchy. Now why on hierarchy? Because there is an existing system, and within that system you have a particular place. So hierarchy leads to a sense of duty on a positive sense. That for the world to function, there has to be, everybody has to play their roles in society, and that any functional social society will have to have some ordering system, and within that, okay, you fit here, this is your role. So duty or responsibility, this is where you are, this is what you are meant to do. That is the primary emphasis within the conservative thought system. Now within the leftist thought system, the primary value is equality. That often the leftist is a reaction to the conservative. That when there is hierarchy emphasized, then they feel that, there is discrimination, there is exploitation. So that is the negative side of hierarchy, that when there is hierarchy there can be domination, there can be tyranny, and there can be exploitation that comes because of that. So within the leftist equality, everybody should be equal. Now, equality, this is something which innately appeals to us. That yeah, actually everybody should be equal. Nobody should be discriminated against. So when there is equality, the positive of that is that there is opportunity. If there's a rigid hierarchy, then some people at the top may get all the opportunities, people at the bottom may not get any of the opportunities. So that is their value. But the problem with equality, see here what we're talking about is that each of these values has its importance, but then that value becomes the sole value. Krishna talks about this as in 18.22, knowledge in the mode of ignorance. It's a very curious concept, because normally we think of knowledge and ignorance as opposite things, isn't it? When knowledge increases, ignorance decreases. That's the normal expectation. But when Krishna is saying knowledge in the mode of ignorance, what it means is the more our knowledge increases, the more our ignorance also increases. That means we get knowledge of only a particular fraction of reality. So, yattu krutsnavad ekasmin karye saktama hetukam. So, one thing is made into everything. So, when one thing, ekasmin krutsnavat, one thing is made into everything. So, for example, this is how biases come up. That say, I may have had a negative interaction with a person from a particular community. Maybe a particular religion, particular race, particular nationality, particular region. Maybe that person cheated me. That person was very calculative, money-minded, manipulative, and that person cheated me. Now my experience is real. But from that experience, when I generalize and say all people from that community are like this, then that is a bias. And no community is a homogeneity. Every community has different kinds of people. So bias means what happens? One thing is my experience, and everything means it's a universal truth. So from my experience, when I extrapolate it to universal truth, absolute truth, that's when it becomes a bias. So when I'm talking about knowledge in the mode of ignorance, say when hierarchy is made the sole value, then the problem is it can very easily lead to tyranny. Now if equality is made the sole value, that can lead to incompetence. Why incompetence? Because by the nature of the world, talent is not equally distributed. Isn't it? Some people are, say, better at music than others. Now, if we say, let everybody have equal opportunity to sing, that's fine, but not everybody is equally good at singing. When some people start singing, everybody wants to continue hearing, and they say, let the hearing never stop. Let the singing never stop. Some other people start singing, and people think, when will the singing stop? Isn't it? So, when we cook for a feast, now, not everybody is an equally good cook. So if you say equality, when equality becomes the only value, it can very easily lead to incompetence. Because everybody is not equally good at all things. So, coming to the point of gender equality is considered to be like an unquestioned value in today's world. And yes, as compared to gender discrimination, that is natural understanding. But there is a difference between the genders. And say the male biology, the female biology is different. Only say women can have children. And women are naturally more interested, say, in people, in relationships. Men are more interested generally in things. Prabhupada talks about the male-female psychology being different. He's talking about it from one perspective, that is of the hierarchy. But there are fundamental differences. So in the Scandinavian countries, they have they did social engineering to have total equality in terms of education. So women grow up with the idea that education is that you can do everything that men can do. And yet they found that even when all social opportunities are equal, there are men who generally gravitate toward jobs like engineering. Women gravitate toward jobs like nursing. Women gravitate toward jobs where they can more interact with people. So now, this does not apply to all women. There will always be exceptions. But there is basically, in the Dharma Shastras, it is described that there are male and female, and there is the masculine energy, and there is the feminine energy. Now, it is not that males have all the masculine energy and females have all the feminine energy. No, with respect to individual males and individual females. No, it could be that, say, there could be a small amount of feminine energy in a male, and there could be some amount of masculine energy in a female. So the individuality, the variation will always be there. But overall there are certain trends. So the point I'm making over here is that equality, when it is made into supreme virtue, it is not with respect to gender, with respect to everything. It denies reality because talents are differently distributed. And actually, if you consider a talent in one, is a blessing for everyone. If we consider a sports match, basketball or cricket or athletics, when one player makes a spectacular move, the whole audience, thousands and thousands, jump up and applaud. But because not everyone can do that. And when that person does something spectacular, during dancing, somebody does a spectacular dance, some children, so many countries have this. America has got talent, Britain has got talent, India has got talent. Why? It's not because all Indians don't have the same number of same kind of talent. So when some kid is a prodigy, and say 5-year-old kid sings with a spectacular voice, it's stunning, it's thrilling. So if we make equality the absolute virtue, the problem is it will lead to suppression of talent. It will lead to competent people who could and should be leaders not having the opportunity for leadership. So this is what happened in the leftist governments. In the educational system, they tried to have that. All students should get equal marks. And what should be equal marks? The top student, the bottom student, let's average them. And what is the average? That is the marks for all students in class. But the result of that, the top students started thinking, even if I study, I'm not going to get any special marks. So why should I study? And the bottom students started thinking, even without study, I'm going to get better marks than what I deserve. So why should I study? So equality alone is not enough. Now liberals, they focus on their primary value is autonomy. Autonomy means I should be allowed to do what I want to do. Now autonomy to some extent, it's positive, is that when there is autonomy, people can take initiative. People have space. Otherwise people can feel suffocated. Now autonomy and equality are slightly different. So leftists, sometimes left and liberal are equated. But the left and liberal are not exactly the same thing. Liberal means I'm liberal, I want to have my space to do what I want to do. So people can take initiative and do what they want. But the problem with this is, if everybody wants autonomy, say if you are cooking for a feast, and everybody says, I'll cook what I want. And everybody cooks sweet rice and nobody cooks rice. There will be a problem. When we live as a society. And if autonomy is the only thing that is emphasized, that will lead to chaos. Because we have to work together unitedly. So the point I'm making is that, I don't want to go further into this political philosophies, but the principle is, there is a value that is of value. But the problem is, when that value is made the supreme value, then it becomes a problem. So like for in India, the caste system was there. The caste system, there was hierarchy. But when the hierarchy was made the only thing, then it became exploitative. It led to discrimination. So for a functional society, all three are important. So the idea is basically, if we move upwards, in our spiritual perspective, so hierarchy, equality, autonomy, ultimately they are meant to heal us. Heal means ultimately we have to develop love. So for us, the Bhagavatam also very clearly says, Varanashram. What is the purpose of Varanashram? Varnashram acharvata purushena parhapuman Vishnur aradhyate pantha nanyat tattosha karanam. That the only purpose of Varnashram is to satisfy Lord Vishnu. And if anything, any kind of hierarchy, if it does not lead to the development of love, like in this verse, that Damenacha, Madhuraya, all those are described. But Vishrambhena, ultimately intimacy, love has to be developed. So whether we start from hierarchy as emphasis, whether we start from equality as emphasis, whether we start from autonomy as emphasis, the essential point is we need to develop love. For us, love for the Lord, that is the most important thing. One of the purposes that Prabhupada also said of the Krishna consciousness movement is to help people come closer to each other and closer to the Lord. So if we emphasize any value, either be it hierarchy, equality or autonomy, so much that ultimately love is not developed, then that will be a problem. So now, what does that mean for all of us? I'll conclude with one last point. That for us on the journey to love, what do we do in today's moment? Now, I came from India. I was introduced to Bhakti in a very conservative, hierarchical kind of brahmacharya ashram. Then last 10 years I have been traveling abroad, especially in the Western world. And I've seen that every place has its own mood, its own ethos. And Prabhupada, in one sense, wanted it like that. Prabhupada wanted each center to be largely autonomous. Prabhupada wanted, to a large extent, Krishna consciousness to be decentralized. And when there was too much centralization, too much hierarchy, for example, when some of the devotees decided to make ISKCON like a corporation, and it says we will centralize all the funds at one place, from everywhere the funds will come, and then we'll allot the funds. And Prabhupada actually had the UBC suspended at that time. He said, all the temple presidents deal with me directly. He said, too much centralization, he says, it will kill the initiative for devotees. So for us, in our present situation, we may be in a particular part of the world where the hierarchy may be more or the hierarchy might be less. But I'll talk about three broad principles by which, according to Desha Kala Patra, that we can find the way in which we can develop love for Krishna. The first principle is listen. Listen is Shravan. See, we need to listen so that we can understand how to practice bhakti. So listen also means to some extent here to obey. In any field that we go, initially we need to learn. And that learning happens by listening. So listen basically to how to practice bhakti. The principles of bhakti, the practices of bhakti, we need to listen. So at least initially, in any field we go, some amount of hierarchy is required. But while we are listening, we can also be learning. Now, learning means what? Here it's not just, learning is about ourselves. What are the talents that I have been given? What are the gifts that I have? So this is the theme which you were talking about last time also when I had come. That we all have our guna and our karma. So guna refers to the things we feel good doing. When we have the quality for doing something, we feel content doing those things. When somebody has a talent for music, then when they are they're just learning some music, singing some songs, even hearing some music. They feel content. Somebody has a gift for cooking. Just feel this is what I'm meant to do. Then the karma is things we are good at. See, this is where we talk about competent. A lot of people may find music good, they feel good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are good at music themselves. Right? So, if ideally we can find something in the intermediate of both of these, what I feel content doing and what I am competent doing, then that is the area where we can find our lifelong service, the service where we can make the most contribution. And traditionally, the purpose of hierarchy, see, the guru was meant to be with the disciple and observe the disciple and understand what was the nature of the disciple and thereby engage the disciple. Now, nowadays we live in an environment where between the authority figure and the subordinates, that level of interaction might not be there. But still, we learn by our observation, we learn by consulting others. So when we are listening, it is meant to also help us for developing our self-observational skills. So basically what happens is when we are listening means we are following, obeying initially. That also this takes us from rajas or tamas to a certain level of sattva. So otherwise what happens is that if without listening to authority, we start learning about ourselves, we may equate ourselves with our lowest desires. I want to do what I want to do. But what do I want to do? I want to watch TV and drink and do things like that. Well, we don't want to identify ourselves or reduce ourselves to our lowest desires. A certain level of discipline, a certain level of inner cleansing, purification, that helps us to learn. I understand more about myself. And then beyond that, we can start looking for opportunities. Opportunities to take initiative, to serve according to the gifts that we have been given. So ideally speaking, the purpose of our movement is not just to impose hierarchy. It is to inspire devotees to take responsibility for serving Krishna. And there's one anecdote in the memories of Srila Prabhupada where Rochan Prabhu is in London and he asks Prabhupada, London at that time is the headquarters, I'll conclude this anecdote, that's the headquarters of the European outreach, and devotees from Europe, from Netherlands, from different parts, from France, from England have come. They're all reporting to Prabhupada how the service was going. So Rochan, he says to Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, everybody has something to do for you. Please give me some service. And Prabhupada, this is the time when our movement is transiting. Initially Prabhupada knew everyone personally. As the movement started becoming bigger, Prabhupada couldn't know everyone personally. So Prabhupada says, what would you like to do? Prabhupada said, he said, whatever you tell me, I'll do. No, what would you like to do? No, Prabhupada, he thought maybe this is a test from Prabhupada. Whatever you want, I'll do. Prabhupada became grave and he says, understand our philosophy. Find out what you like to do and do it for Krishna. So find out what you like to do and do it for Krishna. So this is where each one of us needs to take initiative. We want to serve in a way that we can sustain our service. So that is the hierarchy important. The hierarchy's purpose is ultimately to firstly help us develop love, to help us direct ourselves toward Krishna, to love Krishna, and then to guide us how we can live in a way that we can love Krishna. Now, to what extent that hierarchy will be relevant in our particular context, how we can negotiate that hierarchy, that is something which every individual needs to find their way. The Gita says, don't disturb people's minds, but engage them according to a way that is doable for them. Na buddhi bhedam janayet ajnanam karma sanginam joshayet sarva karmani vidvan yukta samachara. So based on our particular upbringing, Now, each one of us may find that for us, hierarchy may be very important. I need someone to tell me what I should be doing. I can move forward. For some of us, equality may be more important. For us, autonomy may be more important. So, within bhakti, there is scope for all of these values. But from wherever we are, our focus needs to be on healing ourselves. We don't become campaigners for maintaining hierarchy. We don't become activists seeking equality. We don't become missionaries or canvassers of autonomy. We are proponents ultimately of the path of love, proponents of bhakti. And each person can take the individual initiative to find out how best they can advance towards the path of developing love. And the institution and the authorities therein can also help that individual to help to move towards the path of love. So I'll summarize what I discussed. So our topic was about importance of hierarchy in bhakti, and I broadly discussed 3 points. So first of all, I talked about non-hierarchical examples in bhakti. So 3 things: Dhruv Maharaj and Narad Muni, then Srila Prabhupada in New York as contrasted with Srila Prabhupada in San Francisco, and Srila Prabhupada with disciples as contrasted with Srila Prabhupada with life members. So there are examples of non-hierarchical interactions also. Not that the hierarchy was eliminated, but it was substantially subordinated. And then I talked about the political philosophy and how we want to avoid knowledge in the mode of ignorance, where each political philosophy, it has its driving value. So we don't want any of these driving values to become the sole value in bhakti. So that is what can lead to problems. So we discussed three where first we discussed the conservative worldview, where hierarchy is emphasized, and the positive of that is that when hierarchy is there, there is order that can be maintained. We discuss the positive of each of these, the negative of each of these. I won't go into this. Then we discuss the left worldview, where equality is emphasized. Now equality also has its positive, but it has negative where incompetence can result. Then we discuss the liberal worldview, where the autonomy is emphasized. That has positive, but again it also has its negative. So what our focus is, that from each of these, ultimately we want to heal ourselves, go towards the path of love. And the way in our particular situation within our movement we can go towards the path of love, we focus first on listening. Listen to understand to basic principles and practices of bhakti. Then so listening about bhakti, then learning about ourselves in terms of our guna and our karma. So that what are my gifts? And then after that we are looking for opportunities according to our particular place and our particular situation, how best we can serve. In this way, from wherever we are and whatever be the hierarchical structure, we can find our way to move toward Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So any quick questions or comments? Yes, Devratru.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Very wonderful class, harmonizing so many different principles. And I just have a question regarding kind of the state of ISKCON nowadays. It could be a potentially controversial question, but I feel you're doing a really good job kind of harmonizing these controversial subjects. There seems to be a very strong factionalization in the movement nowadays.
Strong?
Fractionalization.
Yeah.
Amongst these different value systems.
Yeah.
And many times what we see is not an attempt to kind of communicate, but echo chambers amongst those particular groups, where they're kind of just echoing the systems which they believe in, without kind of creating room for other people to speak. And if there is someone there, they're basically singled out or ostracized in that particular discussion. How do we create a culture in which these different value systems can communicate, work together, and ultimately become effective in expanding the movement for Srila Prabhupada? Because Srila Prabhupada often said the only thing which can destroy this movement isn't outside influence, but internal influences.
Yeah, it's difficult question, or a difficult situation. I'll talk about three things first. First is that
if you look at history, what is happening in our moment is maybe difficult and distressing, but it's not unprecedented. Every tradition has these kind of confrontations and conflicts. So we take solace from that. In fact, in the Christian tradition, the current Pope is considered highly liberal. And there are people who, the conservatives are way against him. In the Christianity, they have the idea of the lost sheep. And then the Jesus and the representative of Jesus, the priests, or who they are the people who are supposed to find the sheep and get them back. So they're the conservatives who call the current Pope as the lost shepherd. Not the lost sheep, but the lost shepherd. So the idea is that this is common. In fact, the polarization in the church is so much nowadays that generally in any religion, people want to marry within the faith. The Bible says don't be unequally yoked. But the polarization is so much that say conservative Catholics, not even Christians, conservative Catholics will not marry a liberal Catholic. So my understanding is, to some extent, first of all, not only is it unprecedented, we live in a world that is polarized. So it's almost, if I consider America, Florida or Texas, and here California or New York, it's almost a significant difference. So we cannot live in a transcendental bubble unaffected by the way the world is. So it is unprecedented. It is not unprecedented. It happens everywhere. It will happen in our moment also. That's why there's no need to be too distressed about it. Now, the second point is that always, everywhere, there will be moderates. There will be extremists, and when the extremists are there, well, I'm not using the word extremists in a necessarily a derogatory sense. Extremists are basically those who have extreme adherence of an ideology. They may not be violent, they may be verbally violent, they may be physically violent, or they may just be not care for anyone else. But there will be moderates, and the moderates need to link together. So there will be a risk that, so a moderate conservative can actually talk with a moderate liberal, a moderate leftist. So we need to have those moderates, and those voices need to come forward. And from there the discussion will begin. Now the danger in that is that it's like the moderates of a party, so if a moderate liberal wants to talk with the conservatives, the problem could be that the conservatives say that you are too liberal, and the liberals will say that you are being too conservative. But then that is the service of every person. See, we all in one sense have to be like a mridanga. Mridanga is beaten from both sides, but has to give out good sounds. So like that, where we are, say when we are trying to share bhakti in an environment that is more liberal, then the people will say, hey, your tradition is too conservative. And people from within tradition will say that in trying to reach out to people, you are being too liberal. So there will be criticism. But that is the expertise of the devotee, the moderates, that now how they can balance that. But we need moderates. And the last point I will make is that our history of the tradition is change has always happened from the periphery. It has rarely happened from the top down. So if we consider when the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition was lost after Chakravarti Pad and others, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not born in the Gaudiya tradition. He was born in the Shakta tradition and he was an outsider. The Gaudiya tradition had become
largely largely ritualistic with the caste Jati Goswamis. They focusing mostly on rituals and maintaining their positions. Again, it had become a reflective of the caste hierarchy. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was on the fringes. He was an outsider who studied the tradition and who started presenting the tradition. He took nominal initiation from a caste Jati Goswami, but he got his primary inspiration from a Vaishnava who was not in that hierarchical structure. And he continued his outreach, and then he brought about a change. If we look at Srila Prabhupada also, now Prabhupada was at the periphery of the Gaudiya Math. So when the Gaudiya Math fractured for whatever reasons, Prabhupada started it again from the periphery. So by using the word periphery, I'm talking about that our tradition is testimony to the fact that an individual can make significant contributions. So rather than worrying about the state of the moment, we can focus on trying to do the best in whatever corner we are at. And from there, things will grow. Prabhupada says that there is, or Prabhupada talked about the world geopolitical scene, but that applies to our movement also. Prabhupada said there is no use of crying for world peace without the awakening of divine consciousness in the individual. So we try to awaken the divine consciousness. That means we say from where we are, how can we move toward developing love for Krishna? And then if we create models that work, so there could be a model which focuses on hierarchy, and that works. There could be a model that focuses on autonomy, and that works. So rather than criticizing those who are emphasizing autonomy and saying that you are deviating, or those who are emphasizing hierarchy that you are deviating, okay, our movement is big enough, let different people have different models. And let's see what works. Phalena parichayate. If genuine devotees who are dedicated, who can practice bhakti in the long run are developed, then that's wonderful. I think if we can focus more on the vertical growth rather than the horizontal conflict, then what will happen is whoever is successful, they will get their space. And then others may also follow. So in one sense, we can say we as a movement are in uncharted territory. That the exact situation that we are in is different from what during Prabhupada's time there were two broad kinds of people, as I mentioned. There are the disciples who were extremely dedicated and the life members who were mostly affiliated. And today what we have mostly are congregation members. Now we cannot, because they have their jobs and careers and families, you cannot expect the same thing that my disciples, I mean, they were full-time disciples, temple resident disciples. So we don't have that in today's world. At the same time, the congregation members are definitely way, way more dedicated than what the life members were. So how exactly in this uncharted territory we should move? Now we need to pray to Prabhupada and Krishna and seek for guidance. But rather than claiming that my way is the only way, we follow the way that we feel inspired by. We feel inspired to follow. And if things work, then others will also adopt it. Yes, Swamas, please.
Wouldn't it be appropriate to think that the GBC is the governing body of ISKCON and that whatever their mandates may be in terms of organization and management, shouldn't we follow that particular principle?
Yes, of course. See, there are two things. Thank you for bringing that point. Srila Prabhupada did institute the GBC. Now, if you consider in terms of hierarchy, Prabhupada was one person who was both, but currently in ISKCON, we have the gurus who are one chain of authority, and the GBC is another chain of authority. And both are working in their ways to carry on Srila Prabhupada's mission. At the same time, the ground reality is that the gurus may have many, many disciples. The GBCs may also have many zones. So how much can the GBC specifically guide? How much can the GBC oversee? Now Prabhupada certainly didn't want the GBC to micromanage. Now, I have talked with several GBC leaders, and you have probably more experience than me, but to a large extent, the GBC has been caught in firefighting for most of the time. That some crisis comes up and we try to resolve the crisis. Now, like setting a vision, the vision casting has largely happened more from individual leaders in their particular zones, whether they be gurus or temple leaders. That has come from them. And I can't think of many initiatives within our movement that actually came from the GBC down and then spread across. This is not to minimize the importance of the GBC. My point is that the GBC is, there is a particular state in which the GBC is right now. So certainly if some boundaries, some extreme boundaries are crossed, then the GBC does come down and mandate and take care of things. But whether the GBC can actually do that in today's world, just like whether the gurus, if a disciple asks a guru, what service should I do? Does the guru actually know the disciple and their nature sufficiently? So do the GBCs know the dynamics of each place sufficiently? So from what I've heard is there are three kinds of the GBC and local temple interactions. There is like actively involved. This quite often when say at least I'm talking from my experience in India, that sometimes where the GBC is also the guru and the temple president is the disciple, then the GBC gives a vision and very strongly implements it. Then so that's like very actively involved. Then there is they are regularly informed, and that means, and then they give consent. That's where reports come up. And then there are GBC also who are like they are like basically like traveling preachers. They come and they visit, they talk with a few people at that time. So I would say that if the GBC expands substantially, now they're trying to create the regional secretaries and other things, so then maybe that will work. But how exactly things should be and how exactly things are right now, that's varying significantly. And so I think that a lot of initiative depends on the individual leaders at particular places, and then finally on individual devotees to find out how best they can serve. You would like to add something? This is just my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that has a place, what you're saying. I agree with that. But then I think that another principle would be something that you mentioned about love. So there should be a principle of love also in terms of how we deal with even the GBC situation and interrelations. So I think that principle of love is a very important factor. And then I think that love should be focused on, the love that Prabhupada gave us in terms of his teaching and what he actually wanted us to institute and carry on and, press on. So I think that love is an important issue, because if you love each other, as you're mentioning, then the cooperation is a normal thing. We're talking about a husband and wife. If a husband and wife don't love each other, then how can they coexist? How is it possible to be in the same place, in the same house, with a woman or a man that you don't love? There's no function there. It's a dysfunctional situation. So I think with us also, love is an important ingredient in terms of our activity. And it should be love based on the principles that Prabhupada gave us, because he gave it to us out of love for, us.
Yeah.
He gave it to us that way. So I think love is a very important issue. And I don't mean like sentimental love. I don't refer to that. I think love means, and like you talked about, activity and principles and conservatism and liberalism So all those things, they may be in a particular person, but if the person, like in America, if you love America, you whoever you are, the love of America, push on America, the greatest, the best, strongest, everything. If you love America, and if you don't love America, then you won't do that.
That's beautifully put. Let's quick reflection on this. There are three things rather. There is action, and with respect to the actions that different people may take. This is answering your question also. They may be very different. So the way, say, outreach might be done in India might be very different from what it is in America. Now that action arises from certain intelligence. The intelligence involves assessing the situation. So we may disagree with actions. We may even disagree with the judgments, the intelligence.
Exactly.
But at a basic level, love means we agree with the motivation. You are here to serve Prabhupada, I am here to serve Prabhupada. But what happens is, quite often, from questioning actions to questioning intelligence, we start questioning motivation itself. And we start saying, you are here to just gain cheap followers. You are here to aggrandize your own power. And you are simply using Prabhupada and ISKCON to boost your own position. Now, is that possible? Unfortunately, it's possible. But is that probable? Well, if a person has been practicing, if somebody simply wanted power, they could just go outside the movement and gain power also. So I think if we can at least have enough love to trust that a person's motivation is good.
Yeah.
This person wants to serve Srila Prabhupada. Then what happens is that there can be agreement with respect to actions. That's great, but we are in such different situations. It's not going to be possible. But at least your actions are intelligible to me. That, okay, this is what you're thinking. I don't agree with it. But when we start doubting the motivation itself, then the actions even become unacceptable. So within the chain of disagreement, I would say that there needs to be some attempt that there are actions which are lovable. Oh, I love what you do. There are actions that are appreciable. Okay, this is good. There are actions that are intelligible. Okay, I understand where you're coming from. There are actions which are acceptable. That I don't understand why you're doing this. I don't agree with your judgment of the situation, but I accept that you are well intentioned. So let's see how this goes. But quite often we go below this, and this is where name calling starts happening, ad hominem attacks start happening, because we start questioning the motivation of people. But let's try to avoid questioning the motivation. That's where I think your point of emphasis on love comes in. Am I reflecting your point, Prabhu?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have maybe a little bit? There are 2, 3 over there. I don't know. Mataji? Okay.
I loved your presentation. It was well thought out and beautiful. I thought love was the right word, but love might be thought of as liberal, so it also needs respect or honor.
Okay, yes. So I was using the word love in more the sense of devotion.
Yeah.
So
You were thinking of bhakti.
it's more of bhakti. So maybe I could use the word devotion. So instead of, I had used the acronym HEAL, HEAL, we could make it heed, head, HEAD. You want to be headed in the right direction. So ultimately, love can be seen as too sentimental. People can have the idea that anything goes in the name of love. That's a well taken point. Our purpose is ultimately devotion.
Yeah, I thought you meant bhakti.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Adibol, Guru. The questions presented were extremely intelligible. Your answers were extremely intelligible. However, being involved and delved into both Krishna consciousness and Christianity, I can see the correlation. Gurudev, according to Bhakti Yoga, would be the head of the shepherd for the lost sheep.
Yeah.
Because the devotee would be, in essence, the sheep. You have your staff. The Christians have their Jesus with the staff. According to some of the principles of Christianity, the tradition, the old tradition, the new tradition is that Jesus was one of the greatest gurus or sannyasis that ever existed. Disciplic succession, I'll get to my question. The hierarchy of disciplic succession from Thakur to Prabhupada to the gurus that we have today, and the disciplic succession from Adam to David to Jesus. All these come into play, as far as I can see, bhakti meaning love, and then agape meaning love. So we have a hierarchy in all systems of traditional religion, I would think. And then the basis of all of them would be divine love.
Yes.
Now, he was asking about...
Okay, so just a minute. Just so that I can process all this. Is this a comment or is it a question?
Well, the question would be, in the hierarchy and the scheme of things, the GBC, the guru, the disciple, how would you describe love, lovable, accountable, intelligible, acceptable, if it doesn't start with Krishna Radha Prem itself for love, then what is the purpose of the tradition?
Yes, true. So our Prabhupada very clearly said it is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And it is not the International Society for Varnashram re-establishment. It is not the International Society for Feminism. It is not the International Society for male chivalry. So the idea is that we have to keep what Prabhupada established. If you look at the 7 purposes of ISKCON that Srila Prabhupada gave, they are very broad. You know, Prabhupada was very far-sighted. He did not get caught into any particular nitty-gritty. He said distributing books, building temples, living a simpler life, and then correcting the balance of material and spiritual values. So that purpose of developing love for Krishna, of fostering Krishna consciousness, and broad pathways for that is what Prabhupada has focused on. See, Prabhupada does not focus on Varnashram. Prabhupada does not focus on gender roles. Prabhupada even does not talk about, within the 7 purposes of ISKCON, he does not talk about many of the things which have become like political hot potatoes today, where they become huge sources of conflict. So within the ambit of living faithful to Prabhupada and pursuing love for Krishna, I think there is a scope. There is enough scope for different devotees to pursue Krishna consciousness in their own ways. You know, one of my friends is he's a Prabhupada disciple. He told me, don't quote my name, but he said, we often quote Prabhupada build a house in which the whole world can live. So he said, Prabhupada build a house in which the whole world can fight. Now what he meant by that, he was not being sarcastic. He was saying that you can fight inside the house. You don't have to leave the house. There can be different devotees living in different places, trying out different ways of pursuing Krishna Bhakti. Okay, so thank you very much. Yes. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Preman.